Back at it.
Lou, you and I were texting the day that the kind of the word started to trickle out that they put that notice on their website. What was your first thought when you saw it?
Well, we'd gotten word at the distributor I worked at that they were probably going under a couple months ago, and it honestly didn't even register to me because I just don't sell that much stuff. It's not really something I send a lot to my customer base. I've talked to a lot of my guys. First of all, I'm going to preface this with I hate to see any American lose their job. There are guys that work at the Delton factory before everyone who's a Facebook commando jumps in here and is like, their stuff wasn't duty grade and I wouldn't take it to war. It's like, show us your campaign ribbons before you show us your gear reviews. But there are a lot of people that worked in, HR, packing the boxes, warehouse managers that are out of a job, and that's awful. It is an ominous sign for budget items. I mean, I have a few customers and friends who've gone down the rabbit hole of either starting rifle companies or own rifle companies and kind of the PO assemble QC game, which is a lot of marketing. The quantities you have to order from that stuff, even on the discount bargain menu of AR parts, is huge. So it's a volume game. And the volume just stopped one day. I mean, one day we were selling 40 AR per customer per week. We'd get them off the truck. We turn right around. It's just not sustainable. And it's really not sustainable up the supply chain when it goes to zero cash flow to them. Because us as a distributor, when we're like, no, we're not taking anymore. And we're going to refuse them at the gate. And they're like, well, that will violate your terms. It's like, and I don't know what the details were. I know that we had really slowed down our purchasing back in 23 is when we really began putting the brakes on cutting POs to guys, and it was over. And if you don't pad your margins enough, and this is what we talked about last time with gun shops, you can't count on turning over X amount of dollars a week for forever. You have to make money somewhere. You have to have money makers, and they're guys that are still growing. I mean, I have customers that are growing in this bad of an economy just because they are that creative. They are that on top of it. They do look for the narrow gaps. And I think you and I were on the phone the other day, and then I get this, and this is the ultimate red flag. I mean, this is the girl on the first date saying, I do OnlyFans, or I still live with my ex-boyfriend in the world of gun shops. And I haven't been asked for that yet. And it's like, you possess zero salesmanship ability. Like, that is the attitude of the average Wendy's drive-through employee. That is not the attitude of a salesperson or someone that just wants to make money in this business. Like, you have to create value. I can't tell you how many things I have bought off the aesthetic creation of Chris Kropp and John Sirkin and their employees, like Instagram photos.
Floor layouts. The floor layouts are key.
The floor layouts. Like for 15 years, that's been snatching paychecks of mine. And I'm like, do I need some multicam arid boat shoes to show the world I'm just completely socially inept? And it's like, yep. John Sirkin says I do. They're cool ways to make money, but there aren't a lot of people doing it. And when you live in the volume world and the volume shuts off, it's over. And again, as sad as that is, there was nothing besides a value proposition in that gun, I think, seriously.
Well, I look at this and I'm like, first of all, I want to be very clear. Like, RCS is 20 years old. I can think of 4 to 6 different distinct instances in the timeline. You were present for some of them at the company as an employee during the time where it's like, we were in the hurt locker so bad where it was like, there's layoffs coming. I've done rounds of layoffs repeatedly in the years that we've been in business. And it sucks. It sucks every single time when you're having to make a choice beside which person stays, which person goes, how are we going to get to the next big event, whether it was like paying the lease payment, paying the payroll. There's always another expense that emerges. And usually the way the universe works is once you get kicked in the gut once, the heavy blows just keep coming. And it's like, it is very hard to pivot and transition out of those. And I do think that like this instance of a rifle company going out of business is not itself any cause for alarm. However, I do think from conversations that we have, I mean, you and I talk all the time about the scuttlebutt, the group chats that we have with friends of ours where it's like, how bad it is other places. And the fact that it's like, this is just the first one that we're seeing that's like, okay, the chickens are coming home to roost here. Like we're now watching as like a long-standing brand has folded up. And I think that like kind of the scary part of it is the way that the market reacted initially was kind of like the ha-ha react, right? Where it's like, everybody wanted to dunk on him because it was like it's a budget grade AR. It's like not for nothing. There are a lot of budget grade rifle companies, and in the same way that like not everything can be, a Lexus or a Cadillac or a Mercedes, like you can't have everything be bottom tier either. I'm wondering from what we're seeing now, how long it takes before, all the stuff goes through the various receiverships and stuff to where that inventory starts to emerge in the marketplace, because that's not going to do any favors to, at the very least, the lower half of the market when it comes to market prices.
Well, what I think they did that was very good is that I know that the people that make decisions where, at least where I worked, knew months ago. So instead of having to fire sale it at the end, we were able to trickle it out, not get caught, being the last man holding the hot potato. I think the people knew and kind of tiered it out. I have no inside knowledge of the inner workings of Delton, but just from how it was handled on our end, it wasn't like one day we woke up and they were like, hey guys, Delton folded this morning. Today is Tuesday. And it's like the Big Short where Jeremy Irons is like, sell now.
Yeah.
And we had to dump a bunch of stuff on our customers. So we bled it out to guys that were Delton guys. And we had customers that, there are places all over the country that were Delton guys. And they got to buy out that product and have it. I mean, again, the real red flag for me with any value proposition is in a lot of stuff with the gun industry is that lifetime warranty warning. And that's not everything, but there are certain value proposition brands. Like I'll just to clear this up before anyone says I'm talking smack. Like I'm not talking about like Sons of Liberty. Sons of Liberty makes enough money in their products, in their soft goods, in their media, in other things that when you break your bolt, they can replace your bolt. When you shoot out your barrel, if it's really a shot out barrel, like they've kind of stood on that ground of like, if you're an end user, you can have this gun. And that's a totally different marketing strategy. So what it does, I was talking to a guy who's been a firearms trainer for a long time yesterday, to something I'll pivot to after this, but he's been a firearms trainer for a long, long time. And he's like, for me, for someone who's shooting 12 to 20,000 rounds a year, that's a no brainer to go with a company like that. And what they realized is that firearms trainer bought the gun himself, shooting it on the range himself. Like that's the legitimacy they need, that pay, the five guys in that class that are on the fence on a rifle that go with them pays for whatever warranty work they have to do. What I'm talking about is when it's a budget brand that doesn't have all the padding of the media and the padding of the SMEs. And they're like, hey guys, like the gun is $200, but if you think the quality's of question, we've got a lifetime warranty. It's like, you can have one of those things. Like, if my gun costs $1,700 and they're like, yo, if it doesn't work, mail it back to us and we'll mail you a new one. Again, not to keep hyping up the Sons of Liberty guys, because there are a lot of different rifle companies I like. But they're like, if you use this in a shooting, we'll send you a brand new setup. Again, a wonderful guarantee that probably has not had to be executed. It's probably been done a couple dozen times. I'm not saying that, officer-involved shootings don't happen with their guns and home defense situations don't happen, but that's not like an everyday
It's
thing.
an edge case. It's not a mainstay of the use case. But I do think that like from a reputation branding perspective, it's a smart thing to do. And from if you're being just a completely mercenary viewer of marketing overall, it's like the cost of replacing that gun is some of the best value you can get. You have to get the same kind of exposure and positive association with your brand. You'd have to spend 8x that for like magazine ads and YouTube influencers and stuff like that. So yeah, from a math problem, it makes sense to do it.
And not saying that it doesn't.
If every week you had to do 20 of those, it's definitely stacks up. All of a sudden you see policies start changing either within the manufacturing and QA process, or the policy facing the customer changes to reflect the monetary realities of those policies.
And now that I've prefaced all that with, I don't want Americans to lose jobs and, blah, blah, blah. No one thought Delton was like a hard fighting man's gun. Delton was not in any of the trial runs for some of the stuff that goes after. And so it was marketed to a different audience. And that audience was an ever rescinding price point where the only value that brand brought to the table was it the cheapest one on the rack on that Thursday? I would sell 50 ARs a week to one customer in 2023. And the only thing that mattered, there was no brand loyalty to that. It's which one is the closest to $300. Who was going to break first and go to the, at first it was like $499 was the cheapest. Then, a year later, once we have a stack of these in the warehouse, we're like, oh, well, we don't have to make that much money on this. And it just rescinded until the demand went away and there was no money.